But let's begin with news out of Ontario. Just this last hour, the provincial education minister has announced a few changes to its back-to-school plan. He says the government is unlocking $500 million in reserve funds for school boards. It's to go towards creating more space to ensure students are physically distancing. It will also spend $50 million, to help schools upgrade their air filtration systems. But the province did not announce mandatory reduced class size limits like many teachers and parents have been pushing for. For reaction, I'm joined by Harvey Bischoff, president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. He is in Bancroft, Ontario. Mr. Bischoff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We just watched Stephen Lecce's announcement. I'm sure you just watched Stephen Lecce's announcement. What's your reaction to the news from the education minister?
Well, with regard to the substantive issues around funding, I mean, this is typically much less than meets the eye when this government makes an announcement. They've not directed the reduction in class sizes. They've not directed that physical distancing be able to be maintained in schools. We have no guarantee if or how school boards will make use of their reserve funds. So it's once again the provincial government abdicating its responsibility to local school boards in a manner that's just is still too little, too late, as it has been all along.
They have created access to this money. It is $500 million that boards are allowed to tap into, and there were, I believe, 4 school boards in the province that didn't have reserves. They're going to top those up. But it seems like they are pushing it down to the local boards to solve any class size issues. Do you think there's enough time for them to do that, to get the space they need, to staff it up, and then to do the HVAC improvements that the minister has made money available for? Because we're like 3 weeks away from school opening.
Yeah, so these are very serious concerns. But add to that the money is restricted to elementary school staffing. In non-designated school boards, we have high schools of 1,500, 2,000 students. Brantford and Barrie would be 2, cities, for example, where that's the case. That will be fully opening come the start of September, and there will clearly not be room to meet the health measures that apply everywhere else in the province. You can't walk into any public space and gather in the numbers or in the proximity that they're going to allow in schools. And so it's completely contradictory, and it defies reason.
Okay, so a coalition of teachers' unions, yours included, have issued a letter saying that what has been the return to school plan from the Ontario government may not meet occupational health and safety guidelines, as you just outlined, talking about the possibility of legal action. Was there anything at all you heard from the minister today that eases any of your concerns?
Look, if boards put significant money into reducing elementary class size, that would help in some cases. I don't think the money is nearly sufficient. It would be about 3 times what's the amount that would be truly required. But it doesn't address our concerns about secondary schools. It doesn't. The $50 million. I mean, right now, school boards spend about $1.6 billion a year on similar types of projects, and so they're going to add 3.5% and claim that that's going to make some significant difference. And this is in schools that have a $16 billion repair backlog already, so doesn't come close to catching up to the needs. So there are still a lot of issues to address, and when it comes to health and safety in a situation like this, there is no silver bullet. There is a suite of measures that need to be taken to address these concerns, and we would like to see them take those seriously.
So the issues raised in your letter from you and the other unions was presented to Minister Lecce today. He was asked to respond to it. I want to play a clip for you now of what the education minister had to say when told about the concerns you would raise in his letter to him. Just take a listen to this.
What matters is the safety of our children. And I think when everyone in this country is working together, when everyone is pulling together to do what's right and collaborating in the interests of safety, and the outlier seems to be the teacher unions obstructing and ultimately opposing, it just isn't constructive. And I don't think it's really the time to relitigate the challenges of the past and the debates of the past. We've got to work together, folks.
So some trigger words there, Mr. Bischoff, that you're the outlier, you're obstructing, you're opposing, and not being constructive. What's your reaction to what he had to say?
I'm regaining my composure after hearing him say those things. Quite frankly, I'm outraged. On March the 12th, the day the school closures were announced, I sent him a letter saying we stand prepared to fully cooperate in order to make schooling safe and effective. There has been no meaningful consultation with us. The school reopening plan bears our imprint in not one single aspect, and yet he claims that he's listening, and he simply isn't. And he went on further in today's press conference to claim a teacher would walk out of our classroom full of students and leave them in an unsafe position if they bumped up against some, collective agreement parameter around workload. It's an outrageous accusation. It inflames the situation at a time when everybody is looking for people to work together. I'm appalled on behalf of my members that he would say such a thing. My members who put their heart and soul into the work they do on behalf of their students. It's so frustrating, and frankly, it's outrageous that he would say such a thing.
I know you didn't like his language today or the totality of his announcement today, but the Ford government has put resources into the school reopening plan, 500 public health nurses to be there to monitor for symptoms. There is money for people to rent space and maybe hire some more teachers. Given what has been rolled out so far, is it close to enough? By our estimation, it works out to about a third of what would be required to truly make the return to face-to-face learning, bring it to an acceptable risk. There will always be some risk, but I also accept that there is risk in having students at home too, risk to their development and their education and their emotional health and all of those things. So I think that would bring it to an acceptable risk if they about tripled the money. But it's beyond me why, when we've been pleading with the ministry since the end of March to talk to us about reopening plans, they have been, dribbling out announcements that we have been kept in the dark about. At this point, 3 weeks away from the beginning of the school year. We've seen today from Ontario's principals, they've called for maybe a delayed start to the school year or a staggered opening to the school year. Do you think school can open on time given the plan that is in place right now?
There's nothing I've seen right now that tells me that schools could open with the degree of safety we would expect for our students and my members if they just continue straight down this path. No.
Okay. Harvey Bischoff, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That's Harvey Bischoff. He is the president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, speaking to us from Bancroft, Ontario. Okay, we're going to hear now from a parent with kids in school, like many of you at home. Jessica Lyons is a parent organizer with the Ontario Parent Action Network, and she joins us from Toronto. Ms. Lyons, your group has said that Ontario needs to invest about $3 billion to open school properly and safely. All in all, the Ontario government has made about $1 billion available. Do you feel any better about things after what Minister Lecce announced today?
What would have made me feel better is if I heard Minister Lecce say we're going to ensure that there are small learning groups of 10 to 15 students per classroom, and we're going to invest what we need to improve ventilation, and we're going to address a suite of other concerns that we have raised and parents have been raising and sounding the alarm about for months. That would have made us feel better. My heart is still in a vice.
The smaller class sizes, there is $500 million that has been made available for local school boards to find space, lease space, hire staff. They have to do that in under a month with schools set to open. But it's not a uniform mandated directive. It's more of an option for the local boards. Do you think that can come close to meeting what you need?
I don't think it can come close. I mean, the TDSB costing report did suggest a great deal more than that. And our understanding is that this is an announcement that makes boards able to spend their own reserve funds more quickly, and some with some possible top up. We're waiting for those details. But here's the truth. We need the government of Ontario to take responsibility for this situation and actually release the funds that are needed. And we need that to be for class sizes that across the board, whether the school board has a reserve fund or it doesn't, all children need to be in small learning groups. And there's other factors here that are not being addressed, including the ventilation. Absolutely, that is a huge topic. But we also need parents to be able to access all workers, guaranteed paid sick days so that they can keep their children home when they are sick. And that is not being addressed by this government. We are also not seeing anywhere near enough funding to adequately address an equity gap and systemic barriers that a lot of students are facing and will continue to face upon return to school in whatever mode they are. Parents are not being given a real choice here, and we're faced with a dangerous situation or a dangerous situation.
Okay, so if the school opening is not going to be delayed, and there was no indication from the Premier or the Education Minister today that that is an option, this is another step in the response to the concerns raised by parents. They didn't obviously go the entire way that you wanted. What would you like to see next from the government? Because it seems like this is coming bit by bit rather than all at once.
I think that I want it to stop being bit by bit, and I want it to stop being repackaged old announcements of money being formulated again and re-announced. I want the government of Ontario to take their responsibility for taking care of the children that need to return to school, their families, their grandparents that right now children are preparing to say goodbye to because they will not be able to safely visit with grandparents any longer. And by extension, the whole province and our ability to have an economic recovery.
They are going to hire about 500 nurses to monitor for symptoms in the school, as well as some additional teachers and staff. Do you think the 500 nurses is enough? Is that the right way to use resources?
So our calculation is that will result in about 1 nurse to 10 schools or approximately 2 visits per month from a nurse. And we have lots of questions about who is actually going to be able to care for children in a sensitive and supportive fashion when they become symptomatic at school, who is going to manage school closures or quarantines of classrooms or entire schools, who is going to manage testing and follow-up. I don't think 2 visits a month is adequate whatsoever. So I think we need to see more funding. And it's just simply unacceptable that we're living in a province as prosperous as Ontario. There's billionaires walking around, and we cannot keep our children safe, and by extension, our families and our whole community safe. Like, this is preposterous.
You know, we saw the New Brunswick government roll out its plan today as well, and they are going to mandate smaller class sizes of about 15, you know, for the earlier grades. What do you think when you see other provinces with a much lower pandemic curve for quite a bit of time? I mean, the entire Atlantic region has very few cases. What's your reaction when you see other provinces going with the smaller classes and Ontario not necessarily mandating it from the top?
The only reasonable plan is to follow what seems to be a growing consensus and strong message from every reputable medical source, including Sick Kids, including Toronto Public Health, including, global health and experts, is that we need to reduce the amount of children in a room together, a more manageable cohort, so that there is less circulating droplets in a room, so that there's less transmission, and it's easier to manage the exponential spread out of those smaller contact groups. So the fact that the Ontario government is just obsessed with getting away with as little money and cheaping out continually, it's not fooling anyone, and I think parents are very, very clear on who is responsible here. And every example that's racking up around us of governments that are performing more reasonably, who are acting in a more caring fashion, is pointing and exaggerating that point to us.
You know, I've got a 6-year-old boy who's supposed to start grade 1 in a couple of weeks, and I have some, deep concerns as a parent about the class size and the conditions that he's going to be going back to. You're a mom, right? You've got 3 daughters,
yeah.
2 of them in elementary school. What are you going to do? Are you going to send them back?
I will tell you that I got 4 or 5 phone calls. They're doing robocalls from the school board. I picked up and I hung up that call 4 times because listening to their options felt deranged. They're literally saying the government needs to give more money to school boards so that we can keep your kids safe. And the Board of Health says this plan is not safe. So press 1 if you're sending your kid back to school. Press 2 if you are doing remote learning, which you can't afford to do and have no option to do. Like, this is really unacceptable. And parents are really panicking, and it's not fair to be given no safe choices. And we know who's responsible, and we're not going to stop raising our voices every single day to get what our kids need to be safe, to keep our communities and families safe, and to keep each other safe.
Okay. Well, Jessica Lyons, good luck. You've got a tough decision to make, like a lot of parents in Ontario. We appreciate your time.
I appreciate it.
That's Jessica Lyons. She's a parent organizer with the Ontario Parent Action Network, speaking to us from Toronto.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.